Do you want to know the secret to getting a band 7 or higher on your next academic Task 1 writing? Well, stick around, I'll show you how. Now, much like maps, you should be excited to get a diagram after you watch this video. The reason is because the steps and the process are quite straightforward. So once you follow the tips that I give you in this video, it will help so much the next time you get a diagram on an IELTS academic Task 1. And you'll think, yay, I got a diagram. And a big thank you to my friends at IELTS-Blog.com. Thank you for providing me with this prompt. If you want to know more about them, check the link below. All right, let's get started. Okay, now as with every single thing that you do on academic Task 1, you have to ask yourself some questions to better answer the question. And the first question, as usual, is what are you explaining? Now usually it's what are you comparing, but in this case it's what are you explaining? And it's pretty straightforward. You know, the process for producing biodiesel. So that's quite straightforward. Nothing really confusing there. Next, you have what is the best starting point? Now, this is very crucial for every, process diagram because you have to find the best starting point. And it's not always straightforward. Many times you get a process like you can see here, where it's cyclical. It's in a circle. So where's the best starting point? Well, I think the most logical place would be here, right? Because everything kind of starts and ends with this renewable resource. So that would be the best starting point. Next, how many steps? Well, let's count them through. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I didn't count the first step, right? Because that's kind of like the first and the last step. It's kind of like the 0 step, if you will, because that's the starting point and the ending point. Now, if it helps you to remember that as the first step, that's completely fine. You organize your diagram whichever way is more comfortable for you, okay? Now, you might be asking, the high protein residue, is that a step? No, it's not. Remember, that's a byproduct. Or the sun energy, is that a step? No, that's something added, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So here we are, things that are added. Well, in this case, there's only one. It's sun energy. But in many diagrams, there are multiple things that are added to, to do the process. So you have to be aware of that. In this case, there's just one. But on other diagrams, there might be a many, there might be 0. So just be aware of that. Any byproducts. Again, with almost every diagram, there will be byproducts. The first byproduct is here. The high protein residue byproduct used as feed for livestock. Just in case you don't know, livestock are animals. It could be cows or pigs. Next, you've got the glycine byproduct used in the cosmetics and food industries. So those are the two byproducts. They're not stages. They are things that are created along the way. Next, how can the stages be combined or separated? A big part of the Task 1 is how well can you organize the information? And there's not just one way. This is the most logical way to me. You've got the first stage because, you've got the first stage where there's, a process and a byproduct. So it's good to combine those together. Then you've got the second stage, again, a process and a byproduct. Now I put 3 and 4 together because they're quite straightforward. You've just got renewable fuel and then existing technology, showing that it's going to a car. So that for me is quite straightforward. And then back to the end or the beginning, you've got the sun energy and the rapeseed or the renewable resource in rapeseed or algae. Okay, so that's the way I would organize it. But again, you don't have to follow me exactly. Now is the time when we want to reword the prompt. Why don't you pause the video now, look at the prompt, that's given, and try to reword it in your own words. And I'd love to see it in the comments. Again, every month I pick a person at random who's made comments on my YouTube videos, and I check their IELTS essay for free. Well, here is mine. The flowchart depicts the steps necessary to produce biodiesel. That's it. Very short, very simple. You can see that I've changed the words quite a bit. And let's get started on the next stage. The next stage is absolutely the most important for all academic task 1. This is the overview. And don't use figures or details. That's an important tip. You'll see in mine, it's very, very short. Organize the main trends. In this case, everything is kind of equal. I'll mention that later, but there's, each step is important. So, that's the trend for this diagram. Keep it short, okay? So why don't you pause the video and try to write an overview. And again, put in the comments section. I would love to see them. Here's mine. The process is a renewable cycle, starting with a plant, followed by 4 stages with 2 byproducts during the process. That's it, okay? So that's it for the overview, because then I'm just going to talk about the 4 stages and the 2 byproducts. And it really is that simple, okay? Once you know that you have 4 stages, then you think, okay, well, I need to write about 4 stages. So let's move on to that. Okay, so like I always say, let your overview guide you. This one's a bit strange because, again, I've only highlighted the 4 stages. That's basically all you're doing here. I mean, the byproducts come, but basically we're focusing on the 4 stages and the byproduct at each stage. So for paragraph 2, I wanted to give you a longer example for this one before we move on to the next body paragraph. The process begins with a resource which can be renewed, such as rapeseed or algae. To grow these plants, only the sun and CO2 are required. Once the crops are harvested, they go to the first stage where the oil is extracted, which also creates a high protein substance to be used as livestock feed. So you can see I've mentioned everything. I've reworded even the prompt a little bit. I've used good grammar. That is a perfect way to start this type of diagram. Now, when we move on to the next one, okay, again, we're focusing on the 4 stages, but now we're on stage 2, right? From the oil extractions, we move on to the second stage, and then ... is where you would put in your words. Producing a byproduct of, again, put in your words, which can be, again, what the use is for that. So this is often what you're going to be doing through diagrams. The next stage, what are you doing at that stage, and what's the byproduct or what's added at that stage. Okay, so that's all I'm going to put here. Again, I love to see your examples down at the bottom in the comments. Okay, and again, we're focusing on the 4 stages. Okay, this one I wrote a little bit more. Once the biodiesel has been produced, it is stage 3, which means it is shipped off to the pumps and sold as fuel for vehicles. This petrol can be added to modern engines as a replacement for standard fuels. I wanted to add that because stage 4, it's not very clear. Okay, they just say existing technology, but you can assume that you don't need a special car for this. So that's why I mentioned that. The vehicles, of course, emit CO2. However, now you can add your final point there, but I think it's pretty obvious where I'm going with the however. Again, put your comments and your essays and paragraphs in the comments section. Now here are some important reminders, and I've noticed that a lot of people stop watching here. That's a big mistake, okay? You should watch this video right to the end, because I have been an examiner for over 10 years, and you would be surprised how many things people forget when it's time to do the real test. You're nervous. So going through this checklist is extremely important, okay? The first one is use a range of present grammatical forms. I didn't mention the time in this one, but it is the present, right? You're just talking about a process. So that could be, passive in the present form. It could be present continuous. But again, you're focusing on the present. Next, no need to compare here, right? We're not comparing two things. You are simply reporting each stage, and each stage is equally important. Use a range of synonyms accurately. This is where if you can take the prompt, because if you just use the exact words in the prompt, like if you just say used as feed for livestock, you don't get points for that. It doesn't count towards your lexical score because you're just lifting the expressions directly off the prompt. So that's something to be aware of. It's okay to do it. It just doesn't count for your lexical score. So being able to reword those stages, that's a big help when it comes to your final score. Try not to copy the words in the diagram, as I just mentioned. Okay, that's the same with the prompt. Don't go off topic, right? You don't want to start saying like why they're focusing on biodiesel, or if you disagree, if you think biodiesel is kind of a waste of food, that's not a time to be mentioning it here. That's something you would do in the task too. So here again, you're just reporting the diagram. And you don't need a conclusion. Again, I've seen so many sites and so many people recommending a conclusion. These are 5 minutes that you can better use for your task too. So don't write a conclusion, write a good introduction, write good body paragraphs. That will cover everything. And then you can move on to the much more important task too. Okay, so I hope that helps. And you don't want me to give you a full essay. I've got quite a few comments from people asking like, provide a real example. Well, I've given you almost everything. You really have. Like, I've explained what you need to focus on, and I'm not making this a vocabulary or grammar lesson. I'm doing this for people who have, a level 6 to 9 grammar and vocabulary. And the reason I make these videos is I've seen so many people get lower scores than they deserve because I've seen good vocabulary, good grammar, but they don't know how to answer these types of questions, or they don't report everything. So that's why I'm making these videos, is so that you can take what you have, and of course you can improve your grammar and vocabulary by studying online, going to a classroom, but I'm here to show you how the process of academic task 1 can be much easier if you ask the right questions and organize your ideas in a much more meaningful way. Please check out the playlist for speaking part 2 and 3. And there I use real questions, I give you real advice, and I do mock tests. It's really helpful. And if you want to see all my videos, check out the links below. And I wish you the best of luck on your next IELTS test.